Right. So welcome back, Heather. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. I read your book, and which is why, like, as soon as I was done reading it, I was like, I want to get you back on, my podcast because I really loved. I mean, one, the story was so moving, and I think a lot of people can relate to it because, like, all these things, whether we had a good life or a bad life, there's all these things that influence our thoughts and beliefs around money.
Yeah.
And like to really see how like you kind of like shared your story, shared like the impact that it had, like, hindsight. And if you want to share the title of your book, I have it upstairs. I
Yeah.
not being fully prepared today.
That's okay. Yeah, so it's called Finally Worthy, Subconscious Money Healing from the Inside Out. And I wasn't sure really what the title was going to be when I was writing it, and then I got all the way to the end and I was like, okay, that's what seemed to really fit because I think it was really a process of realizing that I'm inherently worthy, that you're inherently worthy, like we're all inherently worthy. But because of these things that we have happened in our life, we don't tend to believe that that's possible for us. And so that's where like the inspiration for the title came.
And that like it really hit home for me because some of the people who know me know that I went through kind of a health crisis, like my late 20s, early 30s. Um, and I mean, not that I didn't have worthiness issues or whatnot prior to that, but like the emotional battle of recovering from it. And it was like this, there's something wrong with me. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of good things. Um, which sparked this whole, I mean, it in hindsight and in gratitude, it had, it led me to where I am. But it was like this desperate need to find somebody or something that could fix me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what I uh really started to notice the pattern as I was kind of coming out of this and starting to heal from this is the pattern of trying to really just find love and appreciation because I ultimately didn't get it growing up. Um, and the biggest thing that really hit me while I was doing this work, and it was interesting because while I was writing the book, it was another growth thing that I was like, oh my God, it's that. It really was in that first chapter where I was really going back to that 2-year-old little girl who walked her mom walked away and left. And I don't know like if anybody picks up on it, but um as I was writing the book through the whole process, I actually like went into those parts of myself. Like I actually became that little girl again. And I was like, what was she experiencing? It was not becoming her necessarily, but it was from that perspective of what was she experiencing. And so I was able to really tell the story from that place of, I'm back there. And what was she experiencing? And as I went back there to interact with her at that time, I actually realized that I thought the story was that my mom left and like there was this abandonment wound, right? Like, we all kind of really kind of have that quote unquote abandonment wound. But what I discovered was that my wound actually was much deeper than that. And that little girl actually created the story that she was not good enough and she was not worthy enough to have her mom stay, and therefore she's not good enough to be in company with other important people in her life. And so when I discovered that, when that hit me, that subconscious programming that 2-year-old little girl experienced, and then in hindsight, looking back at every single important, impactful moment of my life of when I met people, when I went to college, when I went to a job interview, when I went to try to get clients, when I met people, like anything, that little girl saying, but you're not good enough to be in this room. You are somehow smaller and you don't deserve to be here. You being in other people's company that are amazing and huge and all of these things, that's not for you. And so when I realized that, there's like this like bomb went off in my head. And so now it's just such a huge part of how I help people overcome these challenges that they have with money. There's that where is this deeper subconscious story? What is that story? And what is that story then play out all the other stories in all the other places?
That's really deep. And like it's interesting that like that story of not only being abandoned, but not being worthy of somebody staying, and having that presence. Um, and I can even see like how that impacted your relationship with your dad because you're relating to him from that. And it's sad that like he was almost reinforcing that story every time he interacted with you.
Yeah, and and from that perspective of that little girl of like she was a burden, she was always felt to be a burden because my dad, it was very obvious. Like my dad made it very, in my opinion, made it very obvious that like we were struggling. He was a struggling student. We didn't have a lot of money. I joke with my husband, I'm like, like I've been making macaroni and cheese since I've been like 4 years old. Um, he laughs at me, but I'm like, I literally like I started taking care of myself at a very young age because my dad just was busy and he kind of left me to my own devices. And so through that, I like learned how to like make oatmeal in the microwave when I was really young. I remember my dad literally said, "Okay, I'm gonna sleep later and you're gonna get hungry in the morning." He showed me like, "Okay, you're gonna use this bowl and this was back when microwaves were like new. This bowl and this cup and this spoon and like you're gonna do this and this much water." And like that's when I really started to like learn independence. And even when I was talking not too long ago, a memory came back to me about my first experience of like interacting with like a mom type. My dad had left to go into the military. He actually left to go to boot camp because he wanted to go into the Air Force. And so he left me to be cared for by this mom and dad, and then a little boy that was my age. And she was going through, I was probably 4 years old. I might have been five. And she was going through the laundry and she was like, "Where's like the dirty laundry?" And she's like, "Where's your underwear?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "They're on my body." And she's like, "Yeah, but this is like 3 or 4 days worth of laundry. Like, do you have like, where's your dirty underwear?" And I was like, "I don't know. I like got out of the bath and I put these ones back on." And she's like, "No, no, sweetie, you have to like switch them out." Like nobody had like that's how much kind of like to my own devices that it had been like my dad, he's like, "Go get in the bath, you wash yourself, you get out." Like nobody was really paying attention to those things. And it just like I'm like, oh my God, wow, like it just puts perspective when I think back to just all of the things that I did to like take care of myself to really be in this like survival place. But that puts so much pressure on us later on in life because, think of all the ways that that then plays out, I mean, so many other places.
Yeah. Well, and it even like when I hear friends who have gone through things like that, or even like with their own kids, of like we take for granted what we have to actually teach our kids to do.
Yeah, right? I
Uh,
mean, I even remember too, like my son's cousin came over and they were like maybe 10 years old. And I was like, "Okay, go take a shower and then we're gonna like go whatever, do whatever." And he like, or I was like, go change your clothes and get clean, go get cleaned up. I don't remember exactly what I said. And he like went in the bathroom and he like put like a alcohol pad on his face and he's like, "I'm ready to go." And I'm like, did you take a shower? And he's like, no, I don't have to take a shower. I'm like, no, sweetie, you have to take a shower every day. But it's again kind of like, because, as parents, and this is huge in our society today, is that parents are just, they're just trying to survive. And it's not to like to put anybody down, and even really to put my dad down. It's just the reality that we are we are in such survival mode
Mhm.
as so many people in our society. And then we're just like trying to, go to work and trying to pay the bills. And it's like we don't realize that, oh, we have to actually tell our kids, hey, you need to go take a shower. You need to go
How you treat
wash. Like, oh,
yourself.
when is the last time you washed your laundry? Blah, blah, like all these things. It's not like it was back in the 50s and 60s when we were able to have one person working and one person taking care of the home.
The other thing that I really loved about your book, which was also I found really inspiring for myself, um, the kind of when you reach that point in your life where you started, listening to your intuition, and like, what do you really want? Because I think that's also like the biggest thing when you've had a lot of trauma and you've had people in your life who didn't value you, didn't value like your needs, your wants, and so you start putting everybody else's wants ahead of yourself. And so, you don't always know what you want. Like I always struggle when people ask me that question of like, what do you want? Like the big picture wants. And I'm like, I don't know. But that listening to the intuition, because even like if it initially leads you to the wrong place, it's eventually going to lead you to the right place.
Because it's data, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's where we get so mixed up and we just get so anxious because we haven't really ever been in a situation where we're following our own path. It's been conditioned in us that we follow a certain set of rules, like go to college, a certain set of rules, like get married, a certain set, like we are so used to following all of these rules. And so when we start to tune in and these rules kind of bump up against this picture that our inner voice is like, hold on a second, time out, like this is not working for us. And so what happens is then you have to then trust yourself to go like, ooh, am I going to trust myself? Am I going to let down all of these rules and all this conditioning? How am I going to, you know, move over? Exactly. How do I move over to that space of starting to listen? And, for me, it was a baby step process in that, um,
It led to a big shift.
yeah, it was listening to just little tiny things like, oh, take a jacket because it might rain, or, or drive this way, or eat this food tonight. Wear a warmer clothes, or, it was really tiny, subtle things. And I just started to become more aware of my environment and become more aware of my body. And this is where I feel it's like huge for people, especially women, is that we have got to start creating these spaces where we are taking times out in our day and we are becoming consciously aware of how we're feeling in our body, how we're feeling emotionally, what is happening around us, like all of that stuff. And once you start to take that, we're talking 90 seconds here. We're talking like a 90-second break to assess and then just become aware, like just to acknowledge, because that's the first step to really starting to heal these wounds and starting to honestly create different patterns around your finances. Is that it's in that pause about, okay, what's happening?
Yeah. One of the favorite things that I learned, like last year, I went on a kick. I wanted to really understand like the Aramaic language that Jesus spoke and what words really mean. Like that's something that fascinates me. And um, there's, I think that's the seraphim, like they are supposed to say like holy, 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 but in the Aramaic, the word is kadosh, 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 which actually means space, space, space.
Oh,
Because it's like,
interesting.
yeah, because it's like, they were originally trying to heal like each individual person, um, and like they would heal for a minute, and then like things would happen, and they would like be in pain again, and they realized like they couldn't keep up with healing each individual person, so it was through creating space that people could choose a different path, a different reality. Like, they could choose to like, oh, like when I sit like this, it causes me pain. Let's not sit that way. Let's sit here. Let's do this. Let's move our bodies this way. And so it creates that space. And, that's one of the things that I love about like any good healing modality. All it's really doing is creating a space within somebody's perception and life so that when they're faced with the trigger, they can say, how do I really want to respond here? What's really the right thing? How do I really feel? Like that 90-second pause you just talked about of like, what do I want? What do I really want here? Instead of like, and like going in attack mode because you're trying to keep yourself safe, but it's not really.
Right, and that's really what became a huge game changer for me is realizing that our body is addicted to the emotion, addicted to the dopamine, and when something happens, so somebody pulls it, car pulls out in front of you and you go into this place, or somebody sends you an email and it's because that's an automatic response that your system has been trained to do. But the important thing is to start to recognize, like, okay, after you've kind of like, you've had this moment, it's to pause and recognize, like, wait a second, what's happening? Why did I become activated? Why did I do that? Like what created that happening? It's not necessarily that we have to like go in and understand all the things. I think that's a longer term like healing process. And I think like this healing space has almost become distorted into think, okay, we have to revisit all of our trauma before we can be happy and all of this stuff. And that's not really the point of it. The point of it is to just have a deeper awareness and a deeper understanding. And I love how you talked about the space, because really that's really the breathing in is when we're taking those conscious breaths in, slowly breathing in, slowly breathing out, because what we're doing is we're actually interrupting our system's pattern that it's used to going just off the rails. Is we're actually interrupting that pattern. And again, that's where you're creating that conscious awareness. And this is why I really call it like from the inside out, because your inside has to settle in. Like you have to settle down enough, because when you're in that place of being activated, there are chemicals in your brain and your body that it sends that signal of protection, and you literally cannot think and process through any type of creative solution while you're in that fight or flight state. And so that's really the point of having that like conscious awareness, that breath, that inward breathing, that outward, like you're allowing your body to do what it naturally does, which is to help you create a creative solution to whatever you're facing. You get a tax bill. Oh my God, panic, panic, panic. I'm going to be under a bridge. I'm going to lose everything. All of that's happening. And so once you're able to settle down your system, then you're able to go like, okay, how about I call them? Okay, can I make a payment arrangement? Okay, can I borrow the money? Like your brain starts to process through, okay, how can I fix this? But you cannot do that when your system is in that aroused state. And that's what like is a huge game changer to me once I really started to understand that. And it's really coming from a place of like your system is addicted to that. And so what you want to do is make it become addicted to feeling calm, feeling ease, so that when you're out of the state of calm and ease and flow, then that's the trigger to say like, wait, what's happening? And then bring you back.
That's beautiful. And I love like, what you said about like the inside out, because that's like the law of correspondence. Like what's happening on the inside is reflected out on the outside. And so like we can change some things out here and it'll have an internal change. But really the only thing that we truly have control over is what's happening inside of us. And so like when we're in that constant fight and flight, freeze and fawn thing, and we're not able to be in that calm state. And the sad thing is like life is this like constant trigger from like news to TV shows to the stress levels at work. Like I was writing a blog post today of like, it's this like I know people when I was in corporate, like they would they had scheduled like an overseas family vacation and they kept postponing it and putting it off like the days that they were supposed to go because of work crisis. And it's like, no, no, no. Like you put yourself first and you go on your family vacation that you,
Yeah, that's the boundaries.
yeah. Um,
But that's where I think it's also really important too, and this is where like, the childhood thing came up for me is really to understand that I was trying to make everyone else happy. Like I was trying to fix things because I didn't have the boundary. I didn't feel safe to set the boundary to say, no, no, actually, we're not going to do it this way today. And even to speak up in meetings, to just like even stand up for myself anywhere. It was a process that I had, it's a muscle that I've had to work through to say like, no, 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 this is the boundary, and this is not crossed at all whatsoever. And so that's really where I think we as a society have to start creating better boundaries for ourselves and really start to create that trust system within ourselves to know that we are still going to be safe. I am not going to be attacked by a bear. Nobody is going to come out of the next office and beat me down. I am not going to lose my job. I am not going to lose my livelihood. The company isn't going to go under. All of these things that our mind tells us is going to happen because we go out of town with our family.
yeah. And I think you made an interesting point in the book of like, when you were in that people pleaser, like, your bosses loved you because it was like almost like you knew what they were thinking and what they needed before like they even asked, and like everything was always taken care of, because it is that like, one that desire to like, if I'm taking care of this person, they are going to take care of me. If I do all this extra stuff, they'll see how worthy I am,
Yeah.
and like all these things. But yet, you know, prior to you being there, there was probably somebody who didn't do that, and things still ran smoothly. Things still got,
Yeah.
and like did this like this class online last year with women at work, and one of the things that they talked about was like women take on all these tasks, like planning lunches, celebrating somebody's birthday, doing this other thing, things that don't actually move their careers ahead. We think, oh, like if I take on these things, but because they're not directly associated with what our actual career is, it doesn't lead to advancement.
Yeah. And if you think about it, how is that then translated to how you run your finances,
Mhm.
right? So if you think about it, like you think, oh, well, I put money in my savings account or I put money towards retirement. But if you're never actually doing the things to, for example, like if you're putting money away, I'm putting money in a savings account, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, right? But you don't really ever have an action plan of how that savings is ever going to be used. So it's basically just like floundered. You're just like, oh, well, then I'll pull it out for this. I'll pull it out for like it's just whatever. Or, you put money away for 401k or savings account for retirement, but you don't have an action of actually you don't even take time off. Like you don't even take the weekends off, like all of these things, right? So this is the exact same thing that we do with our finances and we do in all areas of our life is that we take an action, but it's not a directed action towards anything that actually gets us to any type of goal. Because again, this is where it comes in, where we're following the supposed to plan. Well,
Mhm.
we're supposed to be helpful. We're supposed to plan parties. We're supposed to do that. And it does give you a momentary feeling of feeling good. It does definitely feel good. Like it feels good when people are like, "Oh, thank you so much for planning this. Oh, this is such a good party." Yeah, it does make us feel wanted and make us feel needed. But what is the ultimate goal to how we can feel needed and wanted at our jobs now? Like, how do we start to look at it and say, okay, I have accomplished these things and I feel accomplished because I've accomplished these things today. I've been able to accomplish these things and I feel good about it.
Well, and even like, what this class said is like, there's somebody who taking some of those things off your plate is actually a stretch goal for them to move ahead. And so, like, looking at those things of like, what is one thing on that list that you absolutely love and you want to continue to do, and you continue to do that. What's something that would be a stretch goal for this person, and the things where it's like, you know, it's busy work, but not things that are going to promote us. How can other people at my level, how can we share this burden across all of us so that it's not falling on one person and I'm not being able, I don't have the time to advance my career. And I think what you said really hit home with like the I'm doing the things like even in business, it's that same thing of like I'm doing the things that everybody's telling me I should do to be successful. Like I should have a website, I should have this thing. But if it's either one, not what you're ready for, or like you don't really know yet, like where you actually want to go and the change you want your business to create in the world, you're you're just doing that busy work and it's not actually creating the life that you want. So like looking at all those different areas of your life of like, where are you putting in effort but not getting the actual results that you want?
Yeah, I mean, and even if you look at your finances, like your day-to-day, month-to-month finances, I mean, I've been seeing this a lot too. It's that, it's almost like we sabotage and don't even realize it. I mean, like think of how many times, like when's the last time that you've looked at your bank statement and you've really sat down and you've added up how much money you spent on DoorDash, how much money you spent at the gas station, how much money you spent at I mean, the $5 here, the $10 there, the $20 there. And so I've been doing cash flow budgeting with people with their personal finances because their disposable income is going away because of how the economy is right now. And it leaves us all feeling like, where is my money going? Right. So if you go in and you look at, okay, how much money am I spending on DoorDash and Starbucks and all of these things that's chipping away $5 at a time, $10 at a time, it's to bring awareness to like, how am I'm saving money, right? I'm doing this, but it's almost like you're being ineffective because you also aren't being, again, consciously aware of all of these other little things that you're doing and to what benefit and to what goal. And that really leads into like all these other areas, your health, how, I mean, and if you don't have, if you aren't like planning properly for your meals, then you're not like taking time to eat lunch during the day. And then how is that then affecting your work? How is that? Like it's this snowball effect that we don't really, it's not something that we become aware of until you really are paying attention to it. And you're like, whoa, this whole thing is what's creating it. It's kind of like I've been talking a lot about the homeless situation and a lot of things that are going on in our society. And it's like, all these programs are out there to help people with like, not being homeless, like, oh, shelters or whatever. but why are those people homeless? Like, let's look at why are they homeless? Like, is it a health thing? Okay, so what's going on with the health stuff? Is it that they've been evicted and they've had hard times? So is there like a financial thing? Like, they're not able to get sustainable work. They can't shower. Like, what's the actual underlying issue? Like, why are all these people turning to homelessness and drugs? Like, what's the underlying issue? And so I think we have to take a step back with our finances, and we have to do the same thing with our health, with our employment, with our job, and with our money, and take a step back and go, okay, this isn't working. But what's all the underlying little tiny things that are creating it not to work?
Mhm. Yeah. And then I think, going back then, like once you've kind of assessed things, start to look at like your intuition and, like what does my body need? What does my body want to eat that will actually fuel it?
Right.
What, you
I mean,
know,
how many times do you sit at your desk and you like how long do you sit there and not get up to go pee?
yeah,
Like, I feel like that's one of the things that I work with because I do a lot of work. It's so interesting. Like, we start out on finances and we go into these things like, but how many times do you sit at your desk and you've had to pee for the last 45 minutes, hour and a half? Like, how, I mean, I do it too, right? So it's like if you can start to notice that and start to be like, oh, I gotta pee and get up and go pee, and you start to build in that muscle, then it's like, okay, now I can start to build in the muscle that I like. I'm feeling antsy in my body, and that means I need to get up and go walk around because I've been sitting here too long. My body is like, you need to get up. Like, we are antsy because you need to, like, how your water, are you thirsty? Like, how often do you sit there and you're like, holy crap, my water's out, I'm thirsty? Like,
yeah,
how long do you sit there? Like, these are the little tiny things. And then it's like, how, and I always look at it, and how does this impact your money? Because you can't be the best person that you need to be or want to be in any situation if these tiny little things are going unnoticed and you aren't taking care of these tiny little things. And it's not negotiable. And this is the thing is and I went through this too. I'm just like, well, I don't time to stop and breathe. Like, how dare you? I'm in meetings all day long. Like, I'm on all this stuff. And in the coach, she was just like, bullshit, bullshit. No. And these are like the non-negotiable things. Like, once you can start setting boundaries with yourself on these little tiny things, you can work the muscle to set boundaries in other areas that will move all these other areas forward.
yeah. And looking at like I know in corporate, like the number of meetings that some people have where it's like, is this meeting really necessary? Like, can it be an email? Can we just like,
Yeah, and what is your muscle to push back on that?
yeah,
And in a respectful way. What is your muscle to say, "Hey, I actually take lunch at that time. Can we reschedule it? Can this be a 15-minute call? Like, what is your boundary? I started setting the boundary that I don't take calls before 9 o'clock. And I'm sorry that you're in a different time zone than I am, but my workday starts at 9. I
yeah,
mean, unless it's something uh I do occasionally take 8:30 calls or whatever because to try to get things out of the way. But I'm sorry, I don't just like if you're it's like, but it's that type of thing. But you have to also remember, like, how often are you checking your phone at night before you go to bed?
yeah,
That's your boundary with yourself. And if you can't set that boundary with yourself, then how are you going to set that boundary with other people? And this is where we think about like even the DoorDash thing, right? Like, how often do we know our disposable income is tight and we're just like, oh, I'm just going to order DoorDash, and it's like, but you have to set that boundary with yourself that, like, at 6 o'clock in the morning when you went to leave your house, you left without packing lunch. Like, that's the habit that you have to like start to build in.
yeah. Or even like I know for myself, it's like when I would overpack my day, and then it's like by the time I got home, it was just like even if I had taken food out, it's just like I'm too tired to even cook this. I'll DoorDash.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like
And it's completely reasonable too, right? And this is the thing where that I'm really starting to like, this is where my next evolution is coming to is like these things in life are very legitimate. Like they're very legitimate problems. Like I have to, I got a big tax bill or, my health or, the finances or whatever it is. And it's like what we have to really start to do is like, yes, these are very legitimate things that are coming up in our life. But are we creating like how are we creating this very legitimate problem? And how can we help to mitigate this very legitimate problem that becomes a problem?
Mhm.
And that's a hard conversation you have with yourself.
Yeah.
Like how am I creating this?
Yep.
Because it's easy for you to like look at somebody else and be like, if you like wouldn't, do this thing over here, then you wouldn't be in this situation. And now you wouldn't be over here. And now you wouldn't be complaining to me. You're just creating this yourself. Like it's so easy for us to see that in other people. But when we have this conversation with ourselves, we're like, well, it's different.
Yeah. Well, and I think even like being compassionate with ourselves, like when we have those days,
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
days like this, and I have them maybe once a month or I have them every week,
Yes.
then you can like go back and like adjust your budget to say like, this is the one day, I will DoorDash and I won't DoorDash the other days because I have the bandwidth to do things. And I
Yeah,
have to be
exactly. And that's where I think it does start, right? And that's where you have to bring self-compassion in, you have to bring self-love in. It's almost like when you come against like some shit show situation and you're just like, wow, this has become a shit show. And that's where you bring in the self-compassion. You're like, okay, this is not a good situation. And this is where you have to start like moving your body, doing breathing, reminding yourself you're safe, like all the things. Because what's happening is you're starting to move out of that like tiny little thing, a tiny thing at a time. You're starting to become aware. And so that's starting to move you out of this situation that's such a shit show and your system is like, that's uncomfortable. And so when you start to actually have money being paid towards taxes so that you're not going to owe, right? When you start to wiggle yourself out of debt, when you start to have extra money in your account and you're like, whoa, we don't know what it feels like to have extra money in our account and navigating through that's that discomfort. And that's where that huge amount of compassion comes in. And also allowing yourself to be okay with the fact that this is not normal for you.
and I like that concept because we do have to help our bodies, our minds, our energy. Like if we've been used to like a certain level of income and all of a sudden we start having a bigger income, because I think, that's the other thing, many of us do is like, oh my God, I've got all this excess money. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not worthy of it, or I'm just going to lose it anyway. So, and then it's like, you donate it or you like make poor choices of things because you
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
really expanded to hold
And
that.
that's where I mean, that's really what I would say we call income creep, right? That's what I call it because again, it's very legitimate. Like, I need a new car. I need a bigger house. I mean, that's what I talked about in my TEDx talk was that, I got to this place of like, I have this, well, of course, I mean, I should live in a bigger house. Like, yeah, I need a housekeeper. Like, and then you like look around and you're like, okay, I'm paying for all this stuff like but now I don't like have any money and again it's because it's subconscious you don't realize it like you do not realize your brain is just like well yeah but of course you need this stuff because your brain needs to keep you in this little bubble that things feel tight and things feel uncomfortable and things feel chaotic like how many then when you're going through your healing at what point do you realize like, oh, my life's kind of chaotic? And then what do you do with that information?
Yeah. And I
And
also,
that's where the boundaries come in. That's where you start to set the boundaries with yourself and other people on like, okay, we have to have some conversation. And it's taken, I mean, some of my hard conversations have been months in the making. Like I have avoided them for months and a year or more on some of my hard boundary situations. But what I can promise you is every time you get to that place, you're like, like it's like a sigh of relief. You're like this, like you can set the backpack down
yeah.
when you can get yourself to that place of like feeling safe enough and feeling comfortable enough to be like, okay, we gotta make this decision. We gotta set this boundary. We gotta have this conversation. Once you can get yourself there, it's really it's tough, but it's this backpack has just been lifted off of you every time.
So what is, because um, I have a hard stop.
Oh,
Uh,
yep, you have to go.
yeah. So like, what is, one piece of advice that you would give people, and then how can they get in touch with you? And I'll have that information in the description.
Yeah. As it relates to like money or like what's like a thing on your heart that you want
What
that
you
you're
do,
thinking about?
what you want all your clients and potential clients to know.
Um, so I think what I want to say is you have to have compassion and grace for yourself. Once you start to realize that things are kind of like a little bit more chaotic than you want them to be. And also it's safe to be safe. Like it's safe for you to feel safe in your body and in your system.
I like that. Beautiful. And how can they get in touch with
Yeah.
you?
Well, I'm on all the socials, but my website is heatherdoran.biz and that kind of takes you to all the places you can find me at.
Yep. And again, those will be in the descriptions. If you like this conversation, please subscribe. Please connect with Heather. And thank you so much for being back. I think
Yeah.
like we could probably have like a podcast a month about finances and energetics and stuff, and still just be at this.
Only touch the surface. I know. I know there's so much. But thank you again for having me back. This has
Thank
been
you
really
so much for
exciting.
your book. It was really eye opening, and I've been playing around more with
Mhm.
following
I'd
my
love to hear
intuition.
that.
So
I thank you. I love to hear that. That means a lot.
thank you so much, and have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.